I want to point out one thing about negotiation. If our president had been an Indian, he would have sold Manhattan for $24. We'll talk about what he did with Cuba, how much he's given away the store repeatedly, and that's in our news. But first in the news, something you don't hear about. Bill Gertz, who's the defense editor, reporter, whatever, for the Washington Times, has done a story that should have been in the headlines. The Chinese have test-fired a missile that is more than capable of reaching every city in the United States. And on top of that, they now have MIRV technology, which means they can have 10 warheads on that missile. And guess what? They got the technology from the good old USA. Some of it was given to them by President Bill Clinton. The rest of it they stole. And that is amazing.
Why are we not hearing that at the...
The media isn't interested in that. They're so much more interested in scandal and, you know, what Kim Kardashian doesn't have on and that kind of stuff. I mean, that's the big stories. This is a major thing.
I should say it is.
Major. Wow. 10 MIRV. Now, they have, according to this article, Gertz, and he's very reliable, they have 240 thermonuclear missiles in their arsenal right now. Now, the Russians have several thousand. We have several thousand. The Pakistanis have them. The Indians have them. The Iranians want to get them. What kind of a world is it going to be if suddenly they start throwing nukes at each other? Now, on top of that, you've got Sony, which was going to do a picture, a motion picture, about the leader of North Korea, and it was a spoof, it was a comedy, but the North Koreans took it seriously. They hacked into Sony, got all of their confidential data, compromised their payment schedules. Sony said, we're out of making pictures because we can't pay our bills because we don't, the computers fouled up. But a little country like North Korea can go into a major corporation in America, and the problem is the American media is complicit with that. So as they are releasing this stuff, the American media is salivating to get it out. This is a shocking situation. Cyber warfare is very, very real. We've got the threat of nuclear warfare, and all we can say is Merry Christmas.
What do we do? What do we do?
Well, I tell you what, the only thing I did and what I was doing today, we got to pray. It's in God's hands. And I mean, seriously, we need the Lord to take care of us. This is very serious. When the Chinese, if they feel like it, can now here's the deal, Terry. We've got nuclear defenses. We've got missile defenses, you know, Patriot missile batteries and arrows and whatever. So, okay, they launch. But instead of launching one missile, they launch 10 missiles at the same time. Each of those 10s carries 10 missiles. So now you've got 100 missiles coming down across America, and you've got those things trying to shoot them down before they explode. Very serious.
Something we've never faced before.
Never faced anything like it, and on top of the fact that our command and control system may well be compromised. If a tiny little nation like North Korea can hack into a major studio like Sony, what can they do to something by somebody bigger? And certainly the Chinese can hack, and so can the Russians, and, you know, oh, it's, whew, man. Okay. Well, I remember talking to the Cubans down in South Florida, and I would stop, you know, Viva Cuba Libre, Viva Cuba Libre. That's been a freedom cry for Cubans for decades. And now President Obama says the time has come to make friends. He made a deal with them, and what we understand, he got nothing in return. Terry.
Well, not all Cuban Americans are happy about that deal, and neither are Americans who say we shouldn't be rewarding a harsh dictator. Ephraim Graham has more.
We want to see greater freedom, greater prosperity, greater opportunity for ordinary Cubans.
President Obama went public with a deal reached in secret Wednesday. He's restoring full diplomatic relations with Cuba for the first time since the height of the Cold War. The deal follows Cuba's release of U.S. government contractor Alan Gross and another American intelligence operative in exchange for Cuban spies held in the U.S. Gross was imprisoned for 5 years.
I'm incredibly blessed finally to have the freedom to resume a positive and constructive life.
The deal is the beginning of the end of 5 decades of the U.S. economic blockade of Cuba. It calls for a review of Cuba's status as a state sponsor of terrorism, clears the path for the U.S. to open an embassy in Havana, and opens the door for Americans to visit the largest island in the Caribbean.
I think it's great. It's about time.
But there's also protest in places like Miami's Little Havana community, outcries from families who lost loved ones in 1996 when Cuban fighters shot their planes down.
The worst president that we have in this country for many years.
The president could also face a fight in Congress. Senator Marco Rubio spoke out against the deal, calling President Obama the worst negotiator since Jimmy Carter.
These changes will only lead to greater wealth and influence for this oppressive regime, especially the military.
This is a legacy for the president who is now a lame duck. There's not a lot he can get done, but he can do big things like this to a considerable degree. And he wants it for the legacy that he'll get out of it with the left wing of his party.
And in social media, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham tweeted that he vows to block the opening of a U.S. embassy in Cuba. And presidential hopeful Jeb Bush also tweeted, calling this a massive executive overreach. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Thanks, Ephraim. You know, this weakness that we see at the head of our country is rather bad. Now, listen, I am for opening up to Cuba. You know, we have been sending aid in there. We've had missionaries and stuff going on in Cuba. You know, it's cool. We want to see the Cubans our friends. We want that, and we want Cuba to be free. But listen, they were dependent on money from Nicaragua, from the regime of Chavez in El Salvador. I mean, where is the, I'm sorry, my mind, I'm sorry. But Chavez is out of money. That country is gone busted. Russia was their patron, and Russia has no money, and they're going busted. So we have sanctions on, and they're starting to bite, and that country of Cuba was in the process of going bankrupt. So what are we going to do? We will lift the sanctions and bail them out and not get any concessions. We could have said, release your prisoners, start observing human rights, let's normalize certain things, let's do this, that, and the other. And they would have complied because they had to comply. Now, we just signed a deal, and the president has once again made an executive.
Does he not have people around him? I mean, even if he's not a negotiator himself, I thought that was the whole benefit of being in his position.
The people around him are so weak. They're children, some of them, just kids. I mean, they don't have any experience whatsoever in the real world.
Some from academia without any experience in politics.
It's right? Terrible. It's just terrible. And all of them are concession-minded. They don't love America. They want to give away the store. They think that our abuse of power is something shocking and so forth and so on. And let's be nice to these dictators. And so that's the way they are. Well, some, ladies and gentlemen, are calling him King Obama, and many conservatives agree. President Obama has overstepped his presidential powers one too many times. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington.
Pat, President Obama's executive action on immigration faces a new legal challenge. The American Center for Law and Justice is representing 27 members of Congress to join a federal lawsuit filed by 24 states challenging the constitutionality of the president's new policy.
They believe that their power is being taken away unconstitutionally, that it's not just a political spat with the President of the United States between Congress and the executive branch, but that this is part of Congress's job is to handle the nation's immigration laws. Article 1 of the Constitution absolutely makes that clear.
The ACLJ's brief says the president is exceeding his constitutional authority and disrupting the American government's delicate balance of powers. Well, so far, the president has used his executive authority to create policy on issues like gun control, immigration, and labor relations, among others. And as Paul Strand reports, his critics describe it as overreach and serial lawlessness.
Barack Obama answers charges he's guilty of presidential overreach by saying he's issued fewer executive orders than any other president in the last 100 years. But he's not mentioning he's issued way more presidential memoranda than any of his predecessors. Those memoranda, just like executive orders, bear the weight of law and don't need any congressional approval or action.
If you're doing it day after day after day, as President Obama is on every issue, you essentially overload the system.
When it comes to other presidents issuing memoranda, the only other two who even cracked 100 were Clinton and Bush. Obama has already issued about 200. House Judiciary Chairman Bob Goodlatte worries the president is acting on his own so much he's doing constitutional damage.
Well, he's overreaching in a multitude of ways. There are dozens of examples. Obamacare itself, he has now in 40 different matters changed Obamacare.
Well, it's serial lawlessness.
National Review's Andrew McCarthy, in his book Faithless Execution, lists dozens of examples of Obama doing this.
Where he's either waived the law, unilaterally modified the law, refused to enforce the law. Immigration is another area where we just had a continuous series of situations where the president has just made up the law as he goes along.
The thing is, everything President Obama does, any president does, sets a precedent. And those precedents live long after the man has left the office. Leading law professor Jonathan Turley, a liberal who voted for Obama, wrote in the Los Angeles Times that he's very worried where Obama is taking the country, saying, "The United States is at a constitutional tipping point, the rise of an uber presidency unchecked by the other two branches." Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Vladimir Putin is blasting the West for Russia's economic downfall, saying the West is trying to subdue and disarm Russia. During his annual press conference, Mr. Putin acknowledged the negative impact of Western sanctions over Russia's role in Ukraine, mainly the drop in oil prices. But he said the economic troubles are the price of Russian sovereignty. Putin is also urging a political solution for the crisis in Ukraine, suggesting a quick all-for-all prisoner swap before Christmas and asking Ukraine to grant amnesty to the rebels. Pat, it sounds like Putin may finally be feeling the heat at least a little bit.
I thought about a week or so ago that he might try to go to war in order to get his people's attention away from his domestic problems. He still has that option, but I think Angela Merkel of Germany has put the screws to him pretty hard, and he has no friends anymore in the world anywhere. I mean, nobody is standing with him, and his own leadership is beginning to rebel against him, and so he realizes he's got to back up from that harsh stance, and this is the opening salvo. But you see what he's doing? He's blaming the West. His problems are because of the West. He didn't have anything to do with it. It's because of the West. And that would be a prelude to some military adventure if he needed to, if things started completely getting out of hand. But the Russian economy is facing a serious recession in the next year, a serious recession. Those high interest rates, you begin to put 17, 18% interest rates on an economy, and it'll go downhill. And that's what's going to happen. And, of course, the fall of the ruble recovered just a tad in yesterday's trading, but not enough to make much difference, considering that it used to be at 32 rubles to the dollar. Now it's about 70 rubles to the dollar. And it means that people they're desperate. They're desperate because they don't have money, and the businesses can't borrow money. They'd have to pay twice or 2.5 times as much for the goods they need to import. So it's a serious situation. But it looks like now he's backing away from the precipice. We hope so. We certainly don't want a war. Who wants a war? We don't want that. John?
Alarming anti-Israel steps out of Europe today. The European Union giving Hamas terrorists a free pass while accusing Israel of war crimes. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Europe is falling into the trap of appeasing terrorists by pressuring Israel. CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell has that story.
It was a rough day for Israel in Europe.
Today we witnessed a series of examples of European naivete, and may I add, hypocrisy.
Those examples included the following. The European Court removed Hamas from its list of terrorist organizations. The European Parliament voted in principle to recognize a Palestinian state. and certain parties to the Fourth Geneva Convention called to investigate Israel for war crimes.
All these point in the same direction. They point to a spirit of appeasement in Europe of the very forces that threaten Europe itself. Too many in Europe are calling on Israel to make concessions that would endanger not only the security of Israel, but also, paradoxically, the security of Europe itself.
The European actions came on the same day Jordan submitted a draft resolution to the UN Security Council calling for peace between Israel and the Palestinians within a year and an Israeli withdrawal from biblical Judea and Samaria within 3 years. Speaking to foreign journalists at the annual New Year's toast, Netanyahu described Israel as an embattled democracy in a region plagued by tyranny and Islamist terrorism.
Israel is forced to defend itself against terrorists who time and again try to target our civilians. This summer, they fired thousands of rockets on our cities, and they used their civilians as human shields. That's a second war crime.
Netanyahu said peace won't last in the Middle East unless it can be defended. And European declarations against Israel only reinforce Palestinian intransigence and push peace away.
Peace will only come when the Palestinians are willing to confront their own extremists. And instead of rewarding Palestinian intransigence, the European democracies should support the one and only democracy in the Middle East. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the State of Israel.
The increased pressure comes at a time when Israel is preparing for national elections. Some believe the European moves are intended to weaken Netanyahu because he's an Israeli leader who resists the move to appease Islamic terrorism. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Federal investigators say North Korea is behind the unprecedented cyber attack against Sony. The U.S. penetrated North Korean computer networks to trace the source of the hacking. The primary suspects are members of a North Korean cybersecurity unit called Bureau 121. And investigators are not ruling out the possibility that an insider may have helped North Korea. Sony decided to cancel the release after the controversial film was targeted. President Obama weighed in on the hacking threat.
The cyber attack is very serious. We're investigating it. We're taking it seriously. We'll be vigilant. If we see something that we think is serious and credible, then we'll alert the public. But for now, my recommendation would be that people go to the movies.
The interview is about a celebrity journalist and his producer who land an interview with Kim Jong-un and are instructed by the CIA to assassinate him. Pat, it's really ironic. This film was intended to produce last, but now it's raising concerns about censorship and, as you mentioned earlier, cyber warfare.
Well, it's a major threat, and I think we have to recognize that, our armies today depend on computers. Everything depends on computers. And if your computer doesn't work, you're in a heap of trouble. People keep their records, their bank records, their dates of what they're going to do on computers. All their information is stored on computers. And all of the banking information that you and I have, almost all of it is on computer. And the idea of having hard copies of stuff is non-existent, and the banks are trying their very dead-level best to get away from any kind of cash. They want to go to a checkless cashless society, and cybersecurity is major. And I would like to say that Regent University is going to have a course, a degree program in cybersecurity.
Wonderful. Well, that's
starting this spring.
We are all entrenched in it in cyberspace at the moment.
You got some long-haired kid in sandals in a garage, and he can hack into the computer of the Pentagon. I mean, it's just insane. But that's what happens. But the battle plans, think what would happen if the computers of the Pentagon were compromised and all of the the battle plans and the command and control for the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the ships, the planes, the logistics, if it was all compromised.
That's not a far-fetched perspective
No,
at
it's
all.
not. You know, we and the Israelis did it to Iran, that Stuxnet. We put a virus in their computers which caused those centrifuges to run out of control. We know how to do it, so do others. Whew. Anyhow.
Precarious.
One more plug for Regent.
The war on Christmas strikes in the Hoosier State. That's where the American Civil Liberties Union in Indiana is filing a lawsuit over a nativity scene in the town of Brookville. That's about an hour south of Indianapolis. Reps from the ACLU say the nativity scene, quote, represents an endorsement of religion and has the principal effect of advancing religion and therefore violates the Constitution. The nativity scene has been a town tradition for more than a half-century. City leaders disagree with the lawsuit, and they say they welcome displays from other religions as long as they're tasteful. A group of Florida city leaders walk out of a meeting in opposition to a controversial prayer. Take a look at this video. You can see the mayor of the city of Lake Worth and several commissioners walking out before atheist Preston Smith begins his prayer. It begins by addressing Mother Earth and then the righteousness of Allah with the all-knowing wisdom of Satan. He went on to invoke Zeus, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, and Thor. After the video went public, a Satanist sent a letter to the same city council requesting permission to give a satanic prayer. Remember, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website. It's cbnnews.com.